Hi, I'm Jack Baruzzini, and you're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Jeff Haecker. Hello, Jeff.
Exactly.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hey, Jack.
Today we are discussing the 18th episode of Season 9 of Stargate SG-1, Crusade. The team is stunned when a very pregnant Vala Mandoran makes contact from the Ori galaxy, recounting her story of being mysteriously transported there and forced to go undercover. To protect herself, she marries a local man named Toman to explain her inexplicable pregnancy, only to discover that the child is considered the will of the Ori, an immaculate conception to serve their gods. While Vala conspires with the local resistance group to sabotage the Ori's new fleet of warships, Stargate Command faces a crisis of its own as Russia threatens to reclaim their Stargate. A political power play ultimately resolved by trading them a new Daedalus-class battlecruiser. The two plots converge in disaster when the resistance plan fails, a newly fanatical Toman executes the conspirators, and the communications between Earth and the Ori galaxy are severed, leaving Vala stranded there. With their intel source gone and the Ori threat more tangible than ever, SG-1 embarks on a new desperate quest to find Merlin's ancient weapon, a device rumored to be capable of killing ascended beings. What are your thoughts on this episode, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I like this one okay. It's really just the setup for the finale, so, not too much happens, but it is nice to get kind of Vala back, and she's kind of stepping into more of a hero role, instead of just kind of being along for the ride. She's actually, she kind of, when she made her sacrifice, when we didn't know she was alive or dead, whenever they blew up the super gate, that was kind of really one of her first steps on that journey, and then now she's risking everything to contact them. So I like that, and I thought it was interesting with the political power play too between the Russians and the U.S. and how they ultimately get a new ship, which is something we'll see later in the next season how that plays out. But yeah, overall it's an okay one. Not as much happens, but it's really just the setup for the finale. So yeah, it's okay.
What about you, Victor?
Yeah, so I know we were talking about this episode last time we did the podcast with Lisa, and I think she said something along the lines of, this made her not dislike Vala so much, this episode. And I think so. Vala's a lot more sympathetic in this episode than she has been. The pregnancy was because the actress Claudia Black. Yeah, sorry, I blanked for a moment there. They wanted her back for the rest, for a few more episodes this season, but when she came back, she was pregnant. So Rob Cooper, who wrote and directed this episode, had to write that into the series continuity, basically. So I think it's good. It's it's a waste of a perfectly good Michael Ironside, but yeah. I've said before that Stargate has, at this point in season 9 and 10, they'll bring on these guest actors like Ernie Hudson we saw previously, and just not really waste their performances because they're great actors, but really anyone could have been in that role.
Mm-hmm.
You don't cast a legend like Michael Ironside for something like that, but he's good in the few scenes he's in. So overall, I liked it. This is the first episode that Rob Cooper directed, and there's some fun tweaks in it. I liked how we switched between the point of view of Vala, and she's in Daniel's body. So sometimes we'll see Daniel on the camera while Vala's, in the briefing room. There's some fun moments there. So, we'll see what happens next week.
Yeah, this episode was definitely a lot of laying the groundwork, and it almost felt like something you could have weaved into multiple other episodes, but I understand why they kind of wanted to just front load it all. And it was fun seeing the brief glimpses we got of Daniel acting as Vala. I almost wish they would have just gone with that completely. Because you see it you see him in the mirror and then you see him on the video screen, but just for the sake of story reasons, they kind of did the quantum leap thing where the audience sees Vala even though everyone else is seeing Daniel. But I feel like it would have been fun to see Michael Shanks impersonating Vala a bit more.
Yeah, and I don't know that he did the best job of impersonating Claudia Black. He's just kind of acting girlish when we see him. So
Yeah.
I think he could have done. There are other shows where, a character finds themselves in another person's body, and the actor playing that character, playing someone else, does a much better job of adopting their mannerisms. We saw that with the young Jack episode where the teenaged actor, clone version of Jack O'Neill did a really good job adopting Richard Dean Anderson's mannerisms and stuff.
Or even McKay in that episode from Atlantis where the woman is inside his brain.
Duet.
Yep.
I guess it was just so brief that when Daniel was, or when we see Michael Shanks, it was such a brief scene or parts where he's acting as Vala that I guess I didn't really bump on it. I just was like, yeah, that's kind of how Vala acts. And if you're not going to do it the whole episode, I think it was fine for me, because I thought it was funny when he comes in, or she she's in his body and she goes into the locker room and just kind of looking around at all the military guys and making some goo eyes at them. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. I liked, I think Michael Ironside, for the way he was underutilized, I think he did a good job as playing a bad guy / good guy, where he was probably not the most scrupulous character just based on his position and power in the Resistance. But I think he did a good job of, once you kind of discover that twist, you see like his methodology.
Yeah, so he plays basically the strongman of the village that Vala is in the Ori galaxy, which is not the same village where she was burned to death, but looks an awful lot like that same village. It's the village set, and they have the convoluted Ori pyre set up in the same place. So you have to remind yourself it's not the same village, and they even say in the script a couple times, it's like, it's a different village, but but they all look the same.
Yep.
And so he plays the strong man of this village, kind of rules with an iron fist, make sure everyone's following the Ori, but then we later learn that he's the leader of the multi-planet resistance. And they're going to, sabotage this fleet of Ori battle cruisers. It doesn't work. We don't really learn why it doesn't work, just that, the Ori and their followers have discovered their plan, and, so it's kind of like this big buildup. You're like, we're going to see some cool explosions. And then it's just like, oh, it didn't work. And then he's killed, almost instantly after that. So
I think that was probably the weakest part of the episode, is I feel like they try to pack a whole bunch of plot into like the last 10 minutes, and they just do it through like quick voiceover dialogue. Like, this didn't work, and then this happened, and now this is going to happen. Whereas I feel like they could have stretched that part of the episode more and cut down a bit more on the middle part with Tommen and Vala.
Yeah, so Vala's fallen from the sky as she came through the super gate, and Tommen is a very nice villager who has taken her in and is nursing her back to health. Vala discovers she's pregnant, but as she has not, been with a man, she doesn't know what's going on, so she marries Tommen to kind of cover for the pregnancy there. And then we get this whole convoluted thing later on where the prior's like, no, Tommen, remember that accident you had when you were a child that injured your foot? It also made you incapable of conceiving a child. And he's like, what? No. And it's also just kind of a clumsy way to reveal that Vala isn't pregnant with his child. I think that there are probably better ways that they could have done it, rather, because then you're thinking about like, well, what kind of accident like was this? And you don't really want to think about that.
They didn't even need to do that, because Vala had already made it clear earlier on that she was pregnant before they got married and got together.
Not to Tommen, she hadn't.
Yeah.
Right, not to Tommen, but
yeah.
I feel like that didn't need to be revealed to him in the way it was. Like, they could have done that a different way.
Well, I think they did it that way so that Tommen could have a little bit of an arc of he feels betrayed by Vala, but then it's the will of the Ori that she is pregnant, has the baby, because that will come into play later. And Tommen does have an interesting arc in this show and in the movie. So I think it was kind of important that they at least like gave him and Vala that little bit of set up that little bit of confrontation there, just because then it gives them, something to argue and fight about, that we'll see later.
And we do get a scene where Vala tells them that she's pregnant, but it's not through the conventional means. And of course, the entire team is very skeptical because it's Vala. And they're talking about how, like, well, what other? I feel like there's another important story where this happens, and obviously it's a oblique reference to Christ, but I like how Teal'c immediately just says Darth Vader. Like, they sidestep it, and they do it in a way where they can mention it without it coming across as disrespectful. But it's like he immediately goes to Darth Vader.
Yeah, that was a really good scene because they're like, have you ever heard of anything like this happening before? And all the people are looking at each other in the briefing room. And as you say, Teal'c says Darth Vader, which is, it is problematic in a way, but I think at this point with the Ori, we're past problematic when it comes to Christianity to certain respect, but it is a way to diffuse it. And it helps to know that they had to do it in some way because Claudia Black was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't, set it up that way. It was kind of like the Ori itself. It's like, oh, we have to do this episode, so we need to create a whole new big bad. What are we going to do in 3 months? Oh, let's do this type thing.
Yeah,
I did like how they initially were like, okay, Val, you need to skip ahead, and then she says, I'm pregnant, and then everyone is confused and saying, what? And she said, well, you wanted me to skip ahead, and so now she has to go back. I enjoyed that dynamic of they're just trying to get Vala to get to the point, but I think she is relaying all important information to them, but it's just not coming out as quick as, and they're playing it up for the drama of the TV show too, because really it would be like an hour or so of conversation to get the story, but they're making it seem like it's a lot longer.
Yeah, and so the ticking clock is that General Landry needs Daniel Jackson back to, dialogue and negotiate with the Colonel Chekhov, played by Gary Chalk, as always, and then Shen Zhao Yi, as played by Tamlin Tomita. And because by himself it's not going well, as you mentioned, Russia wants to take back the Stargate, which has been on long-term loan. They're really, Colonel Chekhov has an ulterior motive and is kind of playing both sides against the middle, saying, we'll take it back, China will run the program and China's happy about this, but really he's just negotiating for a battle cruiser, which is a pretty smart way of going around it. And General Landry eventually figures it out, but...
Yeah, and it's... Honestly, I'd forgotten that the Stargate they had was not technically theirs, because it's been so long.
Yeah. It's like, which one's the Antarctic gate? Which one's the other one? Yeah, it's they play gate switcheroo, and you do forget if you aren't, if you don't have it diagrammed out.
Yeah. I almost feel like, given that, that plot point, you think that at some point they would have tried to figure out, because they have ships now capable of interstellar travel. Why don't they just fly to a deserted planet that has a gate and pick that gate up, and that way that solves this whole problem where they're not beholden to the Russians to use the Stargate on Earth.
Plus, they just got 12 Stargates from Ball's ship, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
I don't imagine that, and we see later that they use a lot of surplus gates for a project coming up, in the next season or two of Atlantis. And so, yeah, it's like, why not just drop one of those down the missile tube and use that instead?
It'd be just that they don't know enough yet to reprogram gates, and so they need that short-term solution until Sam can figure out Sam McKay or whatever can figure out how to reprogram a gate. Because I don't know if Felger's algorithm or whatever did something similar, and they, maybe they don't want to mess with reprogramming gates and start another issue like that. So
true. They could have just given the Russians one of the surplus gates and said, "Here's your gate." They're going to be able to tell.
Yeah,
I don't think they have serial numbers on them.
Yeah. But yes, and meanwhile, back in the Ori galaxy, which I don't know if we ever actually get a name for that galaxy or not. It's just a far off galaxy. Claudia is marrying Toman, who's a very nice man, very gentle. I guess he's a farmer or something of some sort, but he has, a very nice apartment. But he's been conscripted into the Ori army, and it gets to wear this cool armor. And Claudia's like, really, you're a gentle, nice man. Are you going to be able to fight and kill in the name of the Ori? And Toman's like, in the name of the Ori, definitely.
Yeah, it's I understand his kind of character, but he's just so bland.
Yeah,
which I guess works for what he needs, and I know we get some growth with him later on, but he's just kind of pathetic.
He is like sad puppy.
But yeah, and like we don't get a lot of details about the Ori plan. We know they have we presume at this point they have super gates because they're going to launch their invasion force and all that. But beyond that, we don't really have an idea of other than they just want to invade and destroy. And we know they've been going around to planets in the Milky Way galaxy to basically forcibly convert people. And I guess this is just that next wave of what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think maybe because they weren't able to forcibly convert everyone, they have to resort to an invasion force. When you see the humans or whatever they are in the Ori galaxy wearing their armor, you're like, oh yeah, these people aren't going to be much of a match for the Milky Way forces because, what are they going to do? Like attack them with wooden swords or something? But then we quickly learn that they have their own staff weapons, which are pretty cool looking. But again, just staff weapons.
Yeah, I feel like this has been one of my main gripes with the lore of Stargate is that so many of the off-planet forces, like we have Earth, which is presumably one of the less developed planets, and our military forces are way more advanced than what you see on a lot of these other planets, whereas they're basically just medieval soldiers with laser guns.
Yeah. And I guess you can argue that, the Ori and the other people want to keep their people living as serfs and don't want to give them the means to overthrow their oppressors. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're not putting them like in super advanced armor or anything, although they are giving them staff weapons, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's similar to the Gould who they got their staff weapons from, like the Gould gave them to the Jaffa, but I'm assuming they didn't really teach them how to make them and teach them how to, create the power, batteries or whatever they were, just because they wanted to keep that knowledge so that they could, if the Jaffa do rise up, they can, take away resources, although obviously that didn't work. But yeah, I think they're keeping, they're just giving them like the basic knowledge, and it's just a point and shoot staff weapon. And the ships, I think, are pretty much run by priors or maybe some higher trained people, and like for the most part, it's just your common soldiers who are just sent. You go invade this, and they just go and follow their leaders to brute force attack. So
it is something that you see in science fiction a lot, where even though in the real world, like the paradigm of war where you just send massive forces against each other to fight is not really a reality anymore. It's more based on like small, more agile teams and technology, and like especially nowadays drones. But we still have this it's like a 19th century conception of warfare, which is interesting to see.
Everybody in like turtle formation or something, as they attack. And their ships too do look pretty cool. We don't see them in flight here, I don't think, but we do see them on the ground, and you can see them behind me as my background here. But I'm just wondering, like, what are they made out of? Do they have other planets where they're mining minerals or something, or are they made out of wood? I don't know. Probably not.
They almost give off like a Warhammer 40K kind of vibe.
Okay.
Like they look like big, like almost like cathedrals or stadiums, like just in the way when they're landed right there.
Yeah, and I can't remember when we see them. Are those things in the middle of Stargates or not? I can't remember.
No, that's just I think it's just their power source. It's kind of just like a ball of energy that,
that's right.
I don't know if it's some kind of like contained like nuclear reaction or something that's contained in the force field, and that's what powers them. But yeah, we see the priors, like I can't remember if it's in this one or another one where they like touch it and it lights up and goes. So
okay, that's instead of breaking a bottle of champagne over the bow, they have the prior turn it on, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the anime Last Exile, which is a pretty good anime from, I think, a year or two before this, where you have these two basically 19th or even 18th century civilizations, equivalent of 19th or 18th century like military organizations that fight with muskets and bayonets, basically, but they fly around in these ships. But there's another third, more technically advanced player or civilization that owns the drive in each of these ships. So without these drives and the engineers from this more advanced civilization, they can't fly. And the way they control like which army is going to win or lose is if one army starts to get the upper hand, they just yank the drive out of the ship and the ship just like crashes down and everyone dies.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a really good anime, Last Exile.
Nice. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's self-contained and 22 or 26 episodes, and it has a really good story that runs through it.
Nice. Yeah, and I guess from a top-down kind of view of the way the Ori run their civilization, you want, if you have like massive amounts of blind followers, that kind of cancels out their technical limitations as far as like their armor and their weapons go. Just keep throwing people at them.
Cannon fodder.
Yeah.
Staff fodder.
And most of the humans in the Milky Way are not technologically advanced, and may not. And we've seen how they've done the disease thing, and they've done other things to like soften soften up the Milky Way. So you can presume that they'll just like these forces will overwhelm the humans, except for the few advanced worlds like Earth too. And they'll just comply with the Ori because they don't want to be destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, I just found a screenshot online of the part, I presume this is probably in the next episode, where all those ships that you see landed behind you, Victor, like power up their energy sources and take off. And it looks like they're like, the ships are like propped up by, I think you might be able to see it in that picture there, but they're like propped up by like logs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they are.
Which kind of makes me wonder, like, what Michael Ironside's plan was to sabotage the ships. Like, did he understand enough about the power source, to know that, if we just route this, conduit to this other conduit, like the power source, well, like that requires a lot of specific knowledge about how these ships work that you wouldn't expect, the leader of resistance on a backwater planet to understand.
Yeah, because I would assume that the people in that village seem to have maybe like a Renaissance level understanding of technology just based on their environment, and maybe he thought he could just knock holes in the side of the ship and it would sink.
Yeah, or something.
It does kind of look like a boat up on props.
He's not exactly like reviewing 3D holographic schematics and that the Bothans provided to him or something.
Yeah.
I guess I just assumed that he has people who are kind of higher up in the Ori, hierarchy. They aren't priors, but are kind of, under the priors or whatever, that were, maybe the ones leading the teams that built the ships. And so they had some knowledge on how to, or what they thought could stop them from, or could blow them up when they power up. So,
that's right.
Yeah,
he did really mention that
an answer there.
Yeah, that he had like prior acolytes on Celestis who were feeding him this information, which you wonder how that works too, because the Ori are pretty much all seeing, right? So on Celestis in particular, how are these people going back and giving this information or these plans?
The way it was conveyed in the episode, it almost seemed like that was like a honeypot that he'd gotten pulled into, and he was never actually getting real information, and it was just a way to take down the resistance. And maybe the priors were aware of that the whole time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He did get the communication device though, so I don't know if maybe it was some of both. Maybe there was some of that, but also there were some legitimate. He had people on the inside who could get him that, get him communication device and whatnot. So.
And Vala gets chained to the incineration device, for lack of a better word, again. And
yeah,
like our 10-year-old kid was like, is she going to get burned up again? And I was like, I don't think so. I think they did that already. But she's left there basically to die, or it's not really clear. I mean, Michael Ironside needs to, he's the one, no, leave her there. And you don't know if he's good or bad because the harlot in the tavern is also a member of the Resistance and is who Vala has befriended. And she's like, no, she can be trusted. And you're like, well, does that mean that they think Vala's, working with the Ori or not? But it turns out, she can be trusted to be part of this Resistance. And Tommen won't bring her water until finally he does bring her water and they release her.
Yeah, Tommen really wimped out there. He only comes and releases her, and the way it's conveyed at first is, he finally plucked up the courage to do something about it, but then it's like, oh no, Sevis is just fine with it now, so Tommen had no fear of repercussions. It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah. I mean, he still thinks it's his child, right? And that's what they even say in the episode, she's been chained up with no food or water for 3 days. That's not good for her, and it's not good for the baby either.
Yeah. And see, when we get the reveal that Sevis is actually the leader of the Resistance, that's when Vala goes to look at the warships, and he kind of comes up behind her, and she pulls out a knife, and he's like, no, it's okay, we're cool. We were just testing you. And it's like, dude, you don't chain up a pregnant lady out in the elements for 3 days with no food and water as a test. That's basically negligent homicide at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not really clear that this Resistance is firing on all cylinders, and they aren't. But and this is all playing out more or less congruent. I mean, Vala gets sucked into Daniel's body. And the way they say it is that Sam was playing around with what they learned from the communication stones. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's because she was in proximity to the communication stones, or was she touching the communication stones in the other galaxy while Sam was doing something? And then she's warped back into her own body just as Tommen comes in and blasts the, communication device, and then blasts, Denya and Sevis, and then is about to blast Vala, but Vala talks him out of it.
Yeah. She's able to convince him that because this child is the will of the Ori, that she could not be part of the Resistance, and they were forcing her to do it, and he falls for that. He's a pretty gullible guy, as we've seen, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, so was Daniel swapped with Vala then? Was he in the Ori galaxy talking to these people while Vala was in the Milky Way? They don't really make that clear, but I think when they did this in the beginning of season 9, they did say that I forget their names, the two that Vala and Daniel swapped with were awake in the Milky Way galaxy talking to them. So I don't know, I thought it would have been interesting or funny to see a scene of Daniel in Vala's body and feeling pregnant and stuff, but I guess that would have kind of shifted the tone a little bit.
Yeah. Oh no.
They could have done that. That would have been fun. We would have gotten Michael Shanks in Vala's dress acting pregnant.
Yeah. I feel like a whale. No, Daniel, you're very pretty.
Guys, what's going on?
Yeah.
What's probably what Daniel would have said.
So, yeah, that's an unanswered question too, at this point.
And
I assume they don't return to that in the next episode.
I don't think so. I don't think we really even see these communication stones again, or at least in SG-1. We sure see them in the universe, though.
We see them in Atlantis as well. But yeah, that would be funny if Daniel came back and is just sitting in the mess hall, eating pickles and ice cream or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was the first episode that Rob Cooper directed. I didn't watch the commentary, but I did watch the featurette on the DVDs where he was talking about how it's been his, when he was 5 or something, his dad took him to see Jaws, and, he couldn't sleep for a week, but he wanted to be basically in control where he could direct and, be in charge of what the audience sees. And so here, I think he'd been with the show, 8 years at this point or more, could finally direct an episode. And so he had Martin Wood and Peter DeLuise and Andy Makita kind of coach him, and Peter West is the cinematographer who's actually directed some episodes too, and is, whenever they have the second unit, sometimes he'll direct some of those those sequences. So he leaned on them heavily, but he did say it was nice being the showrunner, where if he wanted to show something, there was no one above him to say, no, that's not in the budget, or we can't afford that, apart from the studio. So he could spend a little extra money where he wanted to, being both the director and the, chief producer and showrunner. Yeah.
He's his own yes man.
Yeah. And he made some conscious choices that he mentioned. Whenever we're in the briefing room, the cameras are locked off and it's very static. But whenever we're in the Ori galaxy, there's lots of like pans and, lots of camera movement, just to, subconsciously or visually convey that, we're in two different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this episode did a good job of also conveying the amount of time that was passing. Like, obviously, as Vala's telling her story, it's like over months, but then we get to that point where they start working with the communication stones, and I feel like it starts cutting back and forth quicker, so you get the idea that this is happening at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good observation. As we get closer to current time in the Ori galaxy.
Yep. Although they don't take time dilation into effect, I guess.
Like there's a lag.
Another layer of complexity. I assume these work with like quantum entanglement or something like that, though.
Yeah. Through subspace. So.
Yeah, but even so, they ask Vala questions like, "So what are you doing in the Ori galaxy?" And she's just like frozen for like 3 seconds and then starts to talk.
Yeah,
and that would have been funny.
As you did just now, as you were saying it, there was a lag, and then it did that thing where you spoke like really fast as it caught up.
Yeah, little wheel starts spinning in front of her and stuff.
Yeah,
buffering. But
let's try turning her off and on again.
Yeah, move her closer to the surface. There's less. It'll have to go through less of the mountain.
Yeah. Did y'all have any other thoughts on this episode?
No other thoughts. There were some alternate language titles, unless Jeff has some thoughts.
No, nothing else. Just like I said, I think it's a good setup, and we'll see kind of the payoff next weekend moving forward.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I do agree with Lisa's assessment that Vala is much more tolerable here.
Yeah. In terms of other languages, in Italian, this was called, most of the other ones were Crusade, so they weren't so interesting. But in Italian, we got Il pericolo degli ori, which is the Ori danger. And then in Japanese, and you have to love the Japanese for going right to the point, it was called Saibo, which is the Japanese word for virgin, but is used to refer to the Virgin Mary. So
interesting.
Yeah, so they just kind of cut to the the allegory there.
Yeah, that was I feel like that was a very fine line that they had to walk in the writing of this episode, and I think they did a good job of having it not come across as offensive to Christians.
Yeah, it isn't too sacrilegious.
Yeah.
So.
Like you said, other than the fact that the Ori are already kind of one-dimensional caricatures of like medieval Christianity.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Stargate, including Pat S., Kate N., Ron L., Sean K., and Mark B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and you can find our video versions at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And to find previous episodes of Secrets of Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate. And you can email us at stargate@sqpn.com and follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on X at SQPN. And be sure to check out the SQPN Discord at sqpn.com/Discord. And we'll be back next time with the next episode of Stargate Atlantis, Inferno. Until then, Jeff Haecker, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Stargate.
Thanks, Jack.
And Victor Lambs, thank you too.
Thanks, Jack, and Kawoosh. Don't think I've ever heard you call it that before.
Love that. And once again, I'm Jack Baruzzini. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Stargate on StarQuest.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?